Hello, and welcome to HHH, the podcast where we talk about those horrible humans in history. I am your host, Angela Pearson, and if this is your first time joining us, welcome. We are so excited to have you. And if you have been following along or you're a new follower, welcome back. We are so glad to have your support. I just do this podcast for funsies. I don't do it for the monies because I make none. So I am so glad you guys are here and enjoying the stories that I'm telling you. And if you ever have a suggestion for me of someone you would like to hear about, please let me know because I want to talk about who you guys want to hear about. Also, make sure you're liking, following, and subscribing to the podcast, and make sure you share it with anyone that you think would be interested in this. I would love to grow this channel if we can, so please be sure you're sharing this. It would be awesome, and that would be really helpful for me, so I appreciate that. Anyways, today, I do want to warn you, if you hear a big bang or anything in the background, it's probably Max, my dog. He has joined us in the studio before. Today, he is not. But he really wants to, and he's wearing a cone on his head, so anytime he even sniffs at the door, it's gonna bang into the door. So if you hear any banging, just know it's Max and he misses me. That's all. Just ignore it. It's fine. Anyways, today's episode is going to be about one of the most infamous female perpetrators of the Holocaust, a woman who became known by survivors as the hyena of Auschwitz and the Beast of Belsen. Her name was Irma Grese. It's Grese, but I'm going to call her Grease because I'm American, and that's what we do to names. She was young, she was ambitious, she was cruel, and she rose rapidly through the SS camp system, becoming one of the most feared guards in Nazi concentration camps. All before she was the age of 22 years old. Yeah, you heard that right. This episode will explore how a poor farm girl from rural Germany became a symbol of brutality. We'll talk about her childhood, her teenage radicalization, her personal relationships, which that's a doozy, and her obsession with power, and the sadistic behavior that made her notorious among prisoners and fellow guards alike. So, let's dive into this, guys. Irma Grese. It's a wild one. Let's do it. So, Irma Grese's full name is Irma Ida Ilse Grese, which is actually kind of fun to say. Irma Ida Ilse Grese was born on October 7th, 1923, in the small village of Rechen, located in Mecklenburg, North Germany. She was the third of 5 children, and she grew up in a deeply rural environment. Her family was very poor. They were dairy farmers who struggled financially, and life on the Grese farm was very harsh, physically demanding, and emotionally cold. And I feel like I say that about all of our horrible humans. They've got some kind of emotional coldness in their life. So she also had that. Irma was, like I said, the third of 5 children. Her father, Alfred Grese, was described as very strict, emotionally distant, and authoritarian. Discipline was very rigid in the family. Affection was super rare. And like many rural German families of the time, survival came way before emotions or connections with the family. So they were in it to survive together. They weren't in it for the warm hugs and fuzzies. So her mother, Berta Grese, suffered from depression and emotional strain. So she suffered from pretty severe depression. And in 1936, when Irma was just 12 years old, her mother died by suicide after discovering that her husband, Alfred, had been having an affair with a local woman. And she actually found her mother dead. Like, she was the one who found her. The story behind this is, well, at least according to one or two of the documentaries that I watched, Irma and her siblings were told by their mother, Berta, that they were going to clean the house, make it all nice and special. And after they all finished cleaning, they were sent to go get their father. And while they were gone, her mother took her life. So when they came back, they would find her. So pretty tough thing for a 12-year-old to have to deal with. And it was a very defining psychological rupture in Irma's life. With the loss of her mother, the household instantaneously became a colder place. Suddenly, the household collapsed emotionally. Irma lost her primary source of maternal care. Her father quickly moved to his mistress, while he moved his mistress into the home, and eventually married her, creating tension and resentment among all the children. I think he even had a couple children with this woman, and she already had a few children, so they got step siblings and all of that complicatedness. So he moved in his mistress, which created a lot of tension. And then the discipline, like I mentioned before, was pretty strict, but it got even worse and became more enforced with violence. Now, as far as school goes, former classmates described Irma as very shy and socially awkward and withdrawing during childhood. So she didn't have a lot of friends. She was very socially awkward. She was not academically gifted. She did not do well in school at all. Teachers noted poor performance and difficulty concentrating. Her sister even said that Irma lacked confidence and would often run away rather than stand up for herself. So she avoided conflict at all costs. She was very against dealing with conflict, which is going to be interesting when you hear what happens later. So keep that in mind. Your childhood self can change drastically. So she became even more emotionally distant once her mother died, and she became increasingly cold, silent, and isolated because her mother was the only one who showed any kind of emotional connection with her. Now, this is also the period of time when the Nazi ideology was starting to really saturate Germany and the youth culture. Her father strongly disagreed and full-on despised the Nazi Party, which, after doing a lot of research, there's some conflicting beliefs on that. Like, it's almost like after the war, they were like, oh no, we always opposed them. Whereas before, they were just kind of like, sure, whatever. So take this with a grain of salt that he fully despised the Nazi Party. I think he did not like them based off of something that we'll mention a little bit later. But at this time, this is when the Nazi ideology was really starting to ramp up. And the Nazi Party was really starting to come into their own in the 1930s, early 1930s. And that's about this time in Irma's life when she's desperately looking for something to cling on to. So at age 14, Irma left school, which was a pretty common practice for rural girls at the time. And she actually began working unskilled jobs since, she didn't actually graduate from school. She mostly worked on farms as a farm laborer and later as a shopkeeper's assistant. And she lived a very unstable life. But she really hated farm life. So she was really trying to look for something else. She wanted status, she wanted independence, and she wanted power above everything else. She became involved in the League of German Girls, which was the female branch of the Hitler Youth. This organization indoctrinated young women with Nazi racial ideologies and taught them obedience, discipline, and devotion to Adolf Hitler. So she had found something to really cling on to, and unfortunately, it was these radical ideologies. She was able to find structure and a sense of belonging, and she got praise within the group. So something she had never experienced in her younger years. She was wearing a uniform, and it gave her a sense of identity and purpose and belonging to something bigger than herself. And this program ensured that Irma was surrounded by propaganda, glorifying loyalty, racial purity, obedience, and sacrifice for the Reich. So she had finally found somewhere that she felt wanted and needed, and she absorbed it. Former members described Irma as very eager to impress authority figures. She idolized SS officers and admired their uniforms, rank, and social power. So she really, really liked the SS, which in hindsight, we all know is the bad guys. So in 1939, at age 15, she actually tried to train as a nurse at, I don't even want to try and say this, Hohenli Chen Sanatorium, where Nazi personnel were actually treated. It was part of the Nazi healthcare system, and it was completely filled with the elite members of the Nazi regime. It was run by Karl Gerbhardt, I think is how you say his name. Guys, I watched a lot of documentaries and heard these names a lot, so this is just what it is. I can't pronounce names. Anyways, so it was run by Karl Gerbhardt, who was the personal physician to Heinrich Himmler, which if you don't know who Heinrich Himmler is, he was the head of the SS, so the leader of the SS, and a very, very, very bad guy. Very bad guy. He also had a very big role in medical experiments at concentration camps, if that gives you an idea of what a horrible human this is. Anyways, Irma really admired him and saw him basically as a saint of the Nazi Party. From him, she learned that all pain could be justified as long as it was for the quote-unquote right reasons and furthered the Nazi aims. She saw herself becoming a nurse and following in his footsteps. But it wasn't going to happen, unfortunately, for herself, not anyone else. She actually failed the entrance requirements and was completely rejected. Once again, she had failed academically, and she was sent away to work at a dairy factory. This rejection reportedly angered her deeply. She wasn't sad, she was mad. And witnesses later described how she became obsessed with finding another way into the Nazi institution because she just had to be a part of that. That's where she felt like she was needed. Now, like I mentioned before, her father did not like the Nazis, and he strongly opposed her growing interested in the SS system. He wanted her to remain on the farm, which in hindsight would have been the smarter option for her. Because, yeah, you'll see why. I mean, for everyone on this planet, it would have been the better option, but for her specifically, it probably would have been the better option. But their relationship is slowly deteriorating because of how strongly he opposes what she's doing. Now, Karl Gerbhardt had really liked Irma and saw how passionately she'd wanted to serve the Third Reich. So, knowing that the party was in need of more help at their concentration camps, He gave Irma the contact information of the person running the Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany. So she reached out to them and they let her know that they would love to have her help. She's a little too young just to wait a little bit and reapply. So by 1940, at just 17 years old, Irma left home entirely and volunteered to join the SS Auxiliary Service. 17. This decision marked the final break between her civilian identity and her transformation into a camp guard. Now, in 1940, Irma Grese was sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp, and this concentration camp was the main training center for female guards. And a fun fact about the female guards at all the concentration camps, they were all volunteered. None of them were recruited. All of them volunteered specifically to perform those duties. Yeah, let that sink in. These people volunteered to do that. So they must be some pretty scary women. Now, she was given a full food allotment and a well-furnished residence to live in for joining the SS, along with a salary. So they got a lot of perks for joining the SS. Now, at this camp, she learned camp discipline, punishment methods, prisoner control tactics, and Nazi racial doctrine. So she full-fledged dive headfirst into the violence of these concentration camps and was loving it. She was employed as an SS Alschwerin. That's what they were called. Now, Ravensbrück was super brutal. It was also where Irma began to develop a reputation. She was able to pass and even surpass all expectations of her leaders over the 7 months that she would be there. She easily adjusted to the violence and brutality of the camp, and her supervisors were very impressed. I don't know why that would be an impressive quality, but it was for them. I think violence is appalling, and to be like, oh, well, look how good she is at just wanting to be violent. What a skill. No. But we are talking about Nazis, so it's not surprising at all. So supervisors noted her eagerness to participate in punishment details, which is so wild. Anyway, she volunteered for difficult assignments, and she showed no hesitation when ordered to beat or intimidate prisoners. And this dedication to discipline and following orders, again, super impressive to her supervisors. So, when she was only 19 years old, she got transferred to Auschwitz. But before she did that, she went home. So in 1943, while she was transferring, she returned home to visit her family, and she was proudly wearing her SS uniform. She was just so excited to show them all of her accomplishments, show up in her freshly pressed uniform and look so impressive. And her uniform caused her and her father to get in a pretty big fight. And when her father realized what role she was actually taking on and what she was actually participating in, and that she was participating in these concentration camps, he actually slapped her across the face. And this would be the last time Irma would visit her family, and she would cut all ties with them because of this instance. And like I said, she was 19 years old at this point. That is so young. And I know we've got 19-year-olds listening, and trust me, when you get older, you'll look back and be like, wow, that's really young. But anyway, she was forming her life. And in 1943, she was transferred to Auschwitz Birkenau. Sorry, I missed one letter. Which, if you don't know, that is actually the largest extermination camp in Nazi Germany. It was the worst of the worst. They had the gas chambers and all of that at this concentration camp. Now, at Auschwitz, Irma rose very quickly through the ranks, again because her supervisors noted her dedication and fierceness with the prisoners. It only took her 7 months to get promoted to matron of the camp, or the, German words, Rapporteurin. I promise I looked this up before I talked to you guys. Anyways, so the matron of the camp is one of the highest ranking female guards in the camp. Okay, she's 19 and she's got one of the highest ranks in the camp. This role gave her authority over thousands of female prisoners. And survivors later testified that power visibly changed her demeanor. They could literally see the change occur in her when she got promoted. She wore custom-tailored SS uniforms. She styled her hair elaborately, and I'll make sure I post pictures on my Instagram and Facebook if you want to see pictures of her. She was known for wearing riding boots and carrying both a whip and a pistol. And she began cultivating an image, one of authority, fear, and dominance. Like, a lot of people said that she was very beautiful, like she looked so young and innocent, but then she was so ferocious in the way she treated the prisoners at the camps that you would have never put those two together, because her innocence just, she looked too innocent to be like that. And she, like I said, eventually would receive the nickname of the Hyena of Auschwitz. She got a couple different nicknames. Irma Grese never actually married. We're going to get into some of her relationships now. But witnesses reported multiple romantic and sexual relationships with SS officers, including Rudolf Hess and Josef Mengele. And if you don't know who either of those are, they're also really bad men. Just assume any person that I talk about is a really awful person. But they're up there right by Hitler. These guys are awful. Now, several former guards testified that she openly flirted with the male officers and sought relationships as ways to gain influence in the camp. She was rumored to have had affairs with camp doctors and command staff. There were also persistent allegations, never fully proven, but she had a lot of people who would testify against her about this, that she engaged in sexual abuse of prisoners, both the men and the women. She would select young women for forced labor assignments where she would exploit them. Now, I won't go into any details about any of that, but just know that it happened. And to cover her tracks, she would send any of those that she abused to the gas chambers so they couldn't see anything about it. But other people witnessed this happening. So there are also disturbing allegations that she would supply young women for SS officers to use as they wish. So she was also a human trafficker as well. So it just keeps getting worse and worse. Now, while documentation is limited and complicated by post-war evidence standards, multiple survivors, like I said, described forced nudity inspections, sexual humiliation, selection of young women for, quote, special work details. linked to abuse. Like I said, that's where a lot of the abuse would take place. Again, this reflects power exploitation, not consensual anything. No one consented to any of this. She exploited her power. And what is clear is that she really enjoyed attention from male SS officers and seemed to associate romantic validation with status and power. So being able to do these things to people made her feel really, really powerful. And it's rumored that between fall of 1943 and spring of 1944, Irma believed that she may be pregnant, so she went to get a medical examination from Dr. Pearl and found out that she was indeed pregnant. She requested that the doctor get rid of the baby, even though it was illegal, and Dr. Pearl agreed, got rid of the baby, and afterward, Irma basically threatened the doctor to keep quiet or she would have her killed. Basically, it was kind of a like, yeah, Germany needs a lot of good doctors. It would be a shame if they lost one, wouldn't it? And the doctor was like, okay, you're crazy. But yeah, she threatened the doctor, but she never ended up having a baby. There were rumors when she got caught that she was pregnant, but she was not. In 1944, she was also tested for syphilis that was running rampant through the camp's guards. Apparently, this was happening all over the place. Everybody was just doing everybody. And the test came back negative, thankfully, but those are on official records that she got these tests done. Now, all of these things were really important for her to keep secret because unlike many guards who attempted to remain invisible, Irma appeared to really crave recognition, so she wanted to continue to move up, and no one could know about these sketchy things she was doing behind the scenes. Which is so funny to me because Nazis were always like, we're pure, we're the best race, blah, 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 and they just did so many horrible, awful things. Even the leadership, like, oh man, like not just the awful things like killing millions and millions of people, but like just being genuinely horrible humans, like cheating on their spouses and going and doing sketchy things, drugs and all of that kind of stuff. So there are layers and layers and layers of horrible awfulness in the Nazi party. Now, Irma Grese's reputation for cruelty became legendary among Auschwitz prisoners. Survivors described her as unpredictable and sadistic. She often would hand select which prisoners she would like to go to the gas chamber to be killed. Like I said, she often picked victims of her abuse, but she also would just walk through the camp and like point at people and be like, you go. Like, she was that kind of person. The person who helped her kind of go through and select people was also a really evil person named Joseph Mengele. Like I mentioned, they were supposedly having an affair. And if you've never heard of Joseph Mengele, here's a brief description of why he's the worst. Horrendous experiments on humans. Need I say more? Probably, but that'll be in an episode about him. But these two were very close buddies, like I said, rumored to be having an affair. But he eventually ended this affair when he found out that Irma had been sleeping with prisoners. So he didn't like that because he liked the purity of the Aryan race and thought she was filthy because of that. Now, Irma, when she walked through the concentration camps, carried a braided whip that she used regularly, beating prisoners for minor infractions such as standing incorrectly or working too slowly or making eye contact with her. She even would over-exaggerate when she was doing inspections. They would do daily roll calls and inspections, and if she saw one little smudge of dirt or something, she would overreact and be like, oh my goodness, there is dirt, and then attack them. Like, she used literally anything as an excuse to beat prisoners or make their life not so great. One former prisoner testified that Irma would unleash attack dogs on starving inmates and laugh while they were mauled. See, it just gets worse and worse. Others described how she deliberately shot prisoners at close range, especially those too weak to work. She was also accused of participating in medical selections, sending women with visible illness, pregnancies, or injuries to their deaths. When Auschwitz began evacuations in the late 1944, because the Soviet army was starting to close in and they were closing in fast, Irma was transferred to Bergen-Belsen. She mostly wanted to transfer to Bergen-Belsen because a friend's husband was working there, and she and this friend's husband were having an affair, and he was stationed there, so that was perfect for her. She wasn't worried about the Soviets coming in or the Americans or the British that were slowly closing in at this point. She just wanted to be with one of her lovers, so yeah. Well, when she got to Bergen-Belsen, the conditions were catastrophic. Tens of thousands of prisoners were dying from starvation, disease, and exposure. And instead of helping, witnesses say Irma intensified the abuse. She continued beatings. Some survivors claim that she would stand on their throats with her heavy boots after kicking them. She even beat some prisoners to death herself. She withheld food rations and enforced roll calls that forced dying prisoners to stand for hours. Survivors testified that her cruelty at Belsen was even worse than it was at Auschwitz, which is impressive because she was horrible at Auschwitz. Now, she used to do a thing called, quote unquote, making sport, which was the name she gave to torturing and inflicting pain upon her prisoners. She would freak out, like I said, at the very smallest thing and punish whoever was in the vicinity of her. Now, one day, Irma was riding her bike past one of the barracks in the camp, and she saw an older Polish woman standing outside and demanded that the woman return inside of the barracks. But before she could wait a half second to see if this woman would obey her, Irma had drawn her pistol and shot the woman dead. Didn't even give her a chance to respond, just killed her right then. She was also known to manipulate prisoners into situations that would justify her torturing or punishing them. For example, one prisoner told of how Irma had started her own rumor about potato peels being left outside a specific door in the camp. Now, a prisoner heard the story and told her sister about it, which both of them were dying of hunger. They were starving to death, so just a potato peel would be amazing for them. So when they finally had enough courage to actually go see if this rumor was true, they had to build up that courage. When they went to go check for the food, Irma jumped from the shadows, smashing the two sisters' heads together as hard as she could. And one said that she was dizzy and had a headache for 2 days after the incident. And Irma just did that just for funsies, just for kicks and giggles. This woman is insane. And by the way, she is now just reaching her 20th birthday. That is where we're at. She's just 20 years old. 20. That's crazy. Irma had received the highest ranking a woman could receive in the SS by the time she was 20. Her victims claimed that although all the guards were brutal, Irma was the worst. Some think she had up to 13,000 victims. 13,000 victims. Well, her bullying was soon to come to an end because in April of 1945, the British forces liberated Bergen-Belsen. they were able to come into the camp. And one of the documentaries that I watched said that her and the leader of the camp, man, I should have written down his name. I can't remember it now. I thought I'd remember it. Anyways, they basically just welcomed them in and were like, hello, British soldiers, come and see what we're doing. Welcome. They weren't ashamed of what they did. They were actually excited to show them what was happening. Maybe not excited, but they weren't ashamed of it, I guess. So when the British got there, they found mass graves, piles of thousands of corpses, and tens of thousands of emaciated survivors. There were 1,000 people in a barrack that should have only held 100 people, and there was over 100,000 prisoners in a camp that was only big enough to hold 8,000 prisoners. Even though there were no gas chambers at this specific one, Bergen-Belsen had no gas chambers. Thousands of people were dying at that camp every day. Even after the British forces arrived, this is wild. The British forces got there to liberate the camp, and even while they were there, like coming into the camp, they could hear constant gunfire as the SS officers still continued to fulfill their duties. Isn't that crazy? Like, your opposition is here to stop you, but you're so determined to fulfill your quote-unquote duty that you're still killing people? What the heck? Now, the bodies of the victims were stacked all throughout camp. And unlike many SS members who actually attempted to flee or hide, Irma reportedly did not resist arrest at all. Some officers had fled before the British had arrived because they had some warning that the British were coming. So they would have had time to get away because they know what they did was wrong. Except for Irma, because she had a chance to flee, but she stayed. She believed that she would not receive any kind of punishment, any kind of backlash, nothing. She didn't think she would be punished at all because she was just, quote unquote, obeying orders. Even after she was arrested, she still acted though she was in the right. She was very haughty, arrogant. She just thought she had done absolutely nothing wrong. Even testifying, like, I had to act the way that I did because the prisoners would act up sometimes. I had no other choice. Well, what else was I supposed to do, basically, is what, yeah, she was very arrogant. Now, Irma Grese was captured on site, and she, along with other guards, were actually forced to bury the dead. Remember, I told you there were stacks of thousands of people that were just stacked upon each other. Well, the British made them bury it, and they were not allowed to wear gloves or any other form of protection while they were burying these bodies. They didn't have that option because I believe the British wanted them to really face what they had actually done. And I honestly don't think that made any kind of a difference for Irma. To be very frank, she still had to do that. But yeah, when she got a trial, she was very arrogant and cocky, which you will hear in just a second. So she was transferred to custody and placed on trial in the Belsen war crimes trial, held in Lüneburg later that year. So at just 22 years old, Irma became the youngest defendant in these trials. During the trial that started September of 1945, survivor after survivor tested against her. Now, some of the SS officers actually had prisoners speak up for them and say, you know, they did try to help, or they were kind to me, or those kinds of things. No one did that for her. Not her. Only horrible stories were shared, and no one liked her because of how awful she had been. Even during the prisoners' testimonies, this is how awful this woman is. During their testimonies, she would actually act, and she would act bored and even laugh. Like, she had to bend forward in her little pew to, like, hide her face because she was laughing at the victims as they shared the horrific things that she did to them. Yeah, she's that kind of person. Now, these victims would describe beatings, shootings, whippings, dog attacks, and selection for the gas chambers, and she thought it was funny. Irma denied most of the charges. Obviously, she thought she was not in the wrong at all. She was just, quote unquote, obeying orders, right? She claimed she had only followed orders. That was her only defense. She showed very little emotion throughout the proceedings, and the emotions she did show were arrogance, laughter. She did cry once, though. She cried when her sister Helena testified about their family life and how it had crumbled, and that's it. That's the only time she sobbed in front of the court. Everything else, nothing. Just arrogance and laughter. Observers noted her calm demeanor, neat appearance, and lack of visible remorse. Now, I think part of the reason that she came across that way is I don't think she really understood what consequences could follow. I don't think she fully grasped that her life was in danger. I think she genuinely thought that she did nothing wrong and that she would be acquitted and let go. I don't think she'd face consequences. But the court found her guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity for the way she had treated the prisoners. She was the youngest woman to be put to death by Britain in the 20th century and 21st. She has been the youngest woman they've ever put to death. And she finally, at that point, when she got sentenced, realized that there were actually going to be consequences for her actions. Now, Irma Grese was sentenced to death by hanging on December 13th, 1945. At 10 a.m., she was executed at Hamlin Prison, which, interesting, so side note, it was December 13th, which was Friday the 13th, and they also executed 13 people that day. Ooh. Anyways, witnesses reported that she walked to the gallows very calmly, and her final words were reportedly a simple schnell. Schnell is what she said, which means quickly. Basically, kill me quick, is what she was requesting. She was 22 years old. Irma Grese remains one of the youngest war criminals ever executed and one of the most infamous female perpetrators of the Holocaust. Her story forces some uncomfortable questions. How does a teenager become a mass murderer? How does ideology reshape morality? And how much evil is learned versus how much of it is chosen? Irma Grese was not born a monster, but she chose power, cruelty, and obedience over humanity. So, Irma Grese is our horrible human in history for the day. I hope you enjoyed her story. Stories like these need to be told. Everyone needs to hear about these horrible humans from history, so make sure you're sharing this podcast with people that you think would enjoy it or people you think just need to hear more about history. But also make sure you're liking and subscribing and clicking the follow button or notification button just in case I need to post anything late ever, because if you know me, you know that can happen. But if there are any historical figures that you would like to hear about, make sure you share those. You can message me on this episode or just go to my Instagram or Facebook and send me a message there. And make sure you join us next week, guys. I have a good one for next week. And I guarantee a lot of you have never heard of him. And he is horrendous. Horrendous. we are going to talk about one of the most important players in the African slave trade of the 1800s. Yeah. We are going to be talking about Gezo, the king of Dahomey. Yeah, his story is wild, so make sure you tune in. So we will see you guys next week on Horrible Humans in History. Thanks for listening. Bye.